real quick. Did you want to add to that?
Well, because you mentioned the balanced budget and the sectoral balance.
Yes.
So yeah, if we ever did enact a balanced budget amendment and were able to actually hit this, now that's questionable whether we can hit it, but let's say that we could hit it. The United States, at any reasonable growth rate, is going to have a trade deficit. This is just the reality of the world right now today. We can go into why that's true, but when our economy is doing well, our trade deficit will hit 6 to 8% of GDP. When we're doing poorly, it falls to 3 or 4% of GDP. If the government has a balanced budget, and we have something slightly broader than a trade deficit, it's called a current account deficit, a balanced government budget and a current account deficit of 5%, by definition, by accounting identity, the private sector, taken as a whole, is going to be running a deficit of 5% of GDP, equal to that current account deficit. Private sector deficits are very rare and extremely dangerous. We had a private sector deficit essentially from 1996 until 2006. And that was one of the fundamental causes of the global financial crisis. We crashed when the private sector no longer could service their debt and people started defaulting on excessive debt. We don't even need the defaults. All we need is for people to realize, hey, I'm too far in debt. I'm going to stop borrowing. I'm going to start repaying my debt. The economy will crash as soon as that happens, if you have a balanced budget and a current account deficit. So the problem, this is what we learned from when godly sectoral balances, is that at the aggregate level, balances have to balance. For every deficit, there has to be a surplus. Okay? For every surplus, there has to be a deficit. So if the government is going to run a balanced budget, but we have a deficit with the rest of the world, the rest of the world has a surplus against us, then our private sector will be in deficit, going further and further into debt. And that is extremely dangerous for the economy because it creates financial problems, financial instability, as Minsky said. So that is why you have to understand the sectoral balances and what you're implying by saying the government will always balance its budget. Essentially, you're saying that means the private sector can never balance its budget. It will always have a deficit in the case of the United States.